we have been working together for many years in these presentations, and we like to give this information, educational information to parents. It's very important, especially about transition services when you're leaving the school district and you're preparing for adulthood. We want these young adults to be able to access all the benefits of community, socialization, working, and so on. And through these benefits, it will assist. Brian will be talking about OPWGD related issues, and then his topic will lead into Social Security income, applying for that at the age of 18. And then I will be talking about, all right, now that your loved one has these benefits, how can we protect them to make sure that the loved one will still benefit from the benefits and keep whatever assets you left in trust for them. So, Brian, I have the screen up starting with OPWDD. So if you could tell them a little bit about yourself and Silo, that would be great.
Okay, good evening. My name is Brian McIlvain. I am the assistant to the Chief Executive Officer here at the Suffolk Independent Living Organization, Silo. And Silo is one of 42 independent living centers throughout New York State that is chartered by the New York State Legislature. And we come under the New York State Education Department, Access VR. And although we are located in Suffolk County, most of our programs and services also go as far as the Queens border. And on the slide in front of us is programs and services. I'm not going to go through them each individually, but they are on the Silo website. And it is best to contact the director for each of those programs so they can give you the most accurate information about the different programs. And there are, I believe at this time, 62 programs and services here at the Suffolk Independent Living Organization. My claim to fame is that I've been assisting families with the review and development of documentation to support the transmittal form for eligibility with the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. Also, perhaps the development of documentation to include updated testing or recommendations for updated testing, and also simultaneously to utilize the documentation to support the initial application for Supplemental Security Income, SSI, on or after the 18th birthday, or if there's a receiving Social Security disability under the age of 18, when there is a review to be an adult child collecting Social Security disability. That's basically what I do on a regular daily basis. And I work with families for while they're in school, out of school as adults, and enjoy what I'm doing. So this is the first slide about the different programs and services here at Silo, the Independent Living Organization. And I also encourage you to also go to the Silo's website to get the updated information. And we're busy. You can go on. Now, piece here that we're going to focus in on will be the transmittal form for eligibility determination with the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And there is required documentation that is necessary to support the transmittal form. And the transmittal form can be submitted at any time while the child's either in elementary school, middle school, high school, after they're out in their late mid-20s, upper 20s, the 30s, 40s. There is no age of when you can or cannot. But what is important when we look at age is that often school districts, adult agencies, clinics, practitioners destroy the records after 7 years. So it's important that the parents collect that documentation while the students are in school, look at what is the clear diagnosis that is being placed in the student records, and if they have any questions, to have that information accurately recorded and to maintain those records. So where years past, often the families would submit a transmittal form coordinated with the school district as they were transitioning out of school. Now it's more often for while in school youth, it may be in elementary, middle school, before getting into high school. And yes, then the students can go on and continue, whether they're going to work, going to college. It runs a parallel, also parallel with Access VR. That's what we try to put into the parents' information basket. So often the most required information would begin with an updated full psychological and adaptive, which is either the Vineland or the ABAS. The composite score must be minimally below 69, and other documentation, especially if there are medical reports or updated specialty reports. Most often we'll be looking at the autism specialty report, which will perhaps build upon previous documentation of the autism, or other medical reports to build on the cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, Tourette's, etc.
Brian, why don't you mention how you work with school districts? You've provided training, right? And you know a lot of the transition coordinators.
Yes, I've been fortunate. Well, we're getting into a little bit of the history lesson there. I began my career when going out and providing training to the 126 school districts on forwarding the available documentation to OMRDD at that time. And at that time, then, we developed here in the Long Island region a school to DDRO transmittal form with a cover letter. That became the Long Island model, which then became the statewide model. And it really is successful. And that's the history of the current transmittal form that we'll be utilizing. Now, up to about the last 2 years, it was always the school district, often the transition coordinator, that was assisting the families with completing and forwarding the transmittal form to the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, 415A Osser Avenue in Hopog. And in those days, it only took about 8 to 10 weeks to receive a return determination of eligibility if the packet was perfect. Now we'll go through. That is coordinated with a care coordination organization, one of the three, Care Design, ACA, or Tri-County. So they will then upload the documentation directly into the OPWD system, but it now takes minimally 6 months to receive a response. So as we go through, where psychological is valid for 3 years with the adaptive, the medical that is submitted with the dates of immunization or the social history with narrative, they're valid for 1 year. So it's not unusual that they could actually expire while waiting for eligibility determination and walking through that process. And we'll walk you through that system. So working with the school districts, it's also important to note that if we look at under the Part 200 regulations, the districts are not responsible for updating medical evidence for the purpose of accessing adult services, but they often work closely with the families of developing documentation. But when we look at what was developed by the school district and what was required by OPWDD in determining eligibility, that's where we try to fill the gaps of what would be the best way to proceed moving forward. So yes, as Regina said, I work closely with most of the transition coordinators in both Nassau and Suffolk County. In fact, they meet on a quarterly basis, coordinated with Long Island University Community of Best Practices. So this is the required documentation to support the transmittal form. Often it's the WISC under the age of 18, the WACE over the age of 18. And this is an important piece that when we look at a psychological, if somebody has autism, PDD, NOS, Asperger's, traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy, Tourette's, it's not unusual for the person to have an IQ of 150, 140, 130, 120, all the way down. That's what is the spectrum. But it's the adaptive skills of the individual that's measured with the Vineland or the ABAS that's necessary to support the transmittal form with a composite score below 69. And sometimes it may be input from the teacher, maybe input from the parent, it may be a blend of the two. So we want to look at that in advance. Okay. And here's the transmittal form. There are instructions on page 2 that is attached. And it's just important to note, and then in section 1, you fill it out correctly. It's last name, first name, middle initial. Similarly as the parent guardian, last name, first name, middle initial. Referring agency. For many, many years, that was the school district. Now it's your care coordination organization. Section 4, check off box 14, and then complete by name, date, and submit this through to your care coordination organization. So meaning that when you begin the process, in addition to contacting the local DDRO office 434-6000, you'll also contact one of the care coordination organizations and ask for an application for care coordination, so that the documentation you are collecting for the transmittal form is often very similar to the application documentation necessary for care coordination. And if I was working with a family to do a review, I outline that in specific steps for the families to follow as they navigate the process moving forward. And here's one of the 3 care coordination organizations. For in-school youth, it's important to note that often the narrative section is included with the social history and provided by the school districts when submitting a transmittal form with their care coordination organizations. For out-of-school youth, often the care coordination organizations assist families with getting a social history with the narrative. But you'll discuss that with your care coordination organization at the time that you're contacting them for services. Now, also as a part of the list of steps that I provide to the families is they contact 434-6000, and I also give the email, and that is to register for a front door training. And that's required. And it's also nice to read in advance the booklet, Front Door Services, that we just skimmed over. So you can read the booklet in advance, you can register for the front door training, and you can do it via Zoom at home, rather than in years past you had to drive up to 415A Osser Avenue, either during the day or in the evening. So things have really moved ahead in a very positive way in terms of the process for eligibility and aligning up services. This is just a little bit of information about the overview of eligibility. You know, it's also interesting is eligibility. Once it's determined, is that permanent for life? And the answer is no. So in other words, if you do get eligibility and you make the connection with a care coordination organization, stay with them, work with them, because if it's 5, 6, 7, 8 years lapsed by, you may have to start the process all over again, because it starts the question as to why did you not continue? So it's suggested to really, once you begin the process, stay with it. Now, this is a DDP-2, and that form, the disability profile, it's part of the assessment process when you start working with your care coordination organization, which will also be a part of a coordinated assessment system, the CAS. Well, this is really to get a global picture of what are the needs of the individual based on the intellectual and developmental disability. What are those supports that they will need as determined by the assessment system? And later on, this document is then what supports then the life plan that'll be developed with the care coordination organization. It's not like just walking in and saying, I want everything on the kitchen table, it's carte blanche. No, where's the assessment to support when you're working with the care coordination organization as to why you would want to apply for those additional support services, which are outlined in that front door guide and provided an overview in your front door assessment.
Okay. So Brian, before I forget, when you're done with OPWDD, I want to introduce a agency, to talk about how, the agency can assist families with the CDPAP program and so on. So I just wanted to interrupt you for that. Sorry. And I will try to find this person on the panels. Okay. Thank you.
And I think that's a wonderful point to bring out, is that in years past, there was like a misunderstanding that you were either one or the other, and where families are working both together. And that's wonderful for those families who are getting both OPWDD services and the CDPAP services blended together. It's a nice wraparound. Okay, what you have in front of the disabilities is the most often those that are identified: intellectual disability, autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, seizure, learning disorder, Tourette syndrome, Prader-Willi. That's just the basis, the beginning. Okay. Now, testing forms, this is just to provide an overview, and that is there are two most frequently utilized adaptive behavior reports, which is the Vineland 3 or the ABAS 3. Now, I do a review of student records every day, and not always are the student records of updated full psychological includes an adaptive with an ABAS or a Vineland. It often is, for school districts, it may be more frequent with the students who are in the life skills classes. But for students who may be mainstream with supports, they may not have an adaptive for the purpose of education. So that's where I bring it to the table of discussion. Okay, here's what you need for the purpose of a transmittal form. And now, what would be the next steps in acquiring one? Are you going to use a clinic and practitioner that accepts your insurance and bundle it together with an updated autism report, a full psychological, or are you going to look to have it done independently, out of pocket? And just to throw the numbers out there as we get into testing. An updated psychological out of pocket, which would be cash, check, or credit card, is $750 for a full psychological. An autism report with the ADOS and the CARS is $750. Or the Vineland or ABAS is $250. So it makes sense that if you can identify a clinic or practitioner that accepts your insurance and who will bundle it all together, then to proceed in that way. Or for those families who will say, okay, I'm having difficulty identifying a clinic or practitioner who will accept my insurance or the time frame, or I would like it reviewed also for the purpose of supporting an application for SSI. We set it up at Silo as a consultant service with one psychologist, and I review all testing before finalized with the psychologist. So then we went through the Vineland, we went through the ABAS. Secondly is also then, you can back it up a little bit, Regina, would be the WACE, which is your psychological, and that for families, it is what it is. Now, also so interesting is with intellectual disability, which is often measured with a WACE or a WISC, that the full-scale IQ, generally for the school districts using a DSM diagnosis, it's 69, provided you also have an adaptive scores that are similarly 69 and below. Later on, when we talk about Social Security, they recognize intellectual disability when the full scale is 59 and below. And when they look at between 60 and 69, they'd like to see a dual diagnosis.
When trying to get these reports, you would, as you mentioned before, you want to make sure the psychological would cover all the necessary testing that you need. Sometimes parents go to these providers and spend time and money that may not be covered by their insurance, and it's insufficient. And they have to be properly educated, as you mentioned, in filling out those activities of daily living, correct? If I can summarize.
Well, you hit on an excellent point, and I'll use this as an example, which is the backside of a report that I'll be responding to tomorrow morning, one that I received yesterday. And this was just administered, the feedback session for the evaluations are 7/22. So this is within a year. And a psychological is valid for 3 years. So the psychological is valid for 3 years. What the report does not include is an adaptive with a composite score below 69. So it does not include a Vineland or an ABAS. It also indicates that the student has autism, but it does not include the methodology for an updated autism report, which would be the ADOS or the ADIR. So this is a comprehensive report. It's very well written. It's 17 pages, but it has only one of the three components that I'll be responding back to the family tomorrow morning. And also, for instance, where the student some districts will receive an updated full psychological every 3 years. Another district may do an abbreviated alternating years or a review of records. So it really varies on the student's placement within education and what the district feels is their responsibility But that's separate than what is necessary for the lifelong service through the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, funded by Medicaid, and then maintaining the Medicaid for those services moving forward. That's the big one.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Megan Shergill to talk a little bit about CDPAP. You're going to be, Brian, this is kind of a break in between now OPWDD and SSI, and with SSI, you're going to get Medicaid, which you'll explain. And there's a great program under Medicaid. It's called CDPAP. And I met, Megan. She has a great agency that assists families in obtaining those necessary individuals or assisting providing that support under the CDPAP program. So I'm going to not talk further about what CDPAP services does. I'll let Megan do that before I get into trouble. So Megan, please go ahead.
But Regina, you were doing so well.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so as Regina and Brian mentioned, my name is Megan Shergill. I'm the Vice President of CDPAP Services at Community Care Home Health Services. Our corporate office is in Smithtown in Suffolk County, Long Island, but we do service all of Long Island, the 5 boroughs of New York City, Westchester, Rockland, Monroe, and Erie County. And as of this Thursday, Regina and Brian, I'm very excited to announce that we are expecting New York State Department of Health to provide us an award for us to service 40 total counties throughout New York State with CDPAP services. So we're very excited about that. So what are CDPAP services? CDPAP, CDPAP, it's an acronym. It stands for the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And what it means is essentially it's a Medicaid-funded home care program, meaning an individual has to have Medicaid, in which a consumer, someone needing home care services, can hire a loved one to be their caregiver, known as a personal assistant in this program. Oh, Regina, thank you for giving me permission to share my...
Oh, what happened to you? What happened to you?
Oh, can everyone still hear me?
Yes. Now I can. Yeah.
Okay.
Share screen, and you were muted, I guess.
Oh, I apologize. So it looks like you disabled my screen sharing. I would just like to share it if possible.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
I will get with it. Just a moment. I have to find you again. It doesn't put people in alphabetical order. So.
Well, I'm just glad that there's a nice volume of people here this evening. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll keep going until.
Yes.
So CDPAP services, a consumer, someone needing home care services, can hire an individual, typically a family member or a friend or a neighbor or a church member, to be their personal assistant, their caregiver. And what does this caregiver do? They assist the consumer, the person needing the home care services, with physical assistance with activities of daily living. So activities of daily living range from things like light housekeeping to meal preparation, toileting, feeding, grooming, dressing, bathing, and beyond. And the reason why people love this program is because, let me paint you a picture. Let's say Mrs. Smith, or let's actually say little Johnny. Little Johnny, who's 8 years old, needs home care services. He needs physical assistance with activities of daily living. He can have his adult sibling be his caregiver. He can have his aunt be his caregiver, grandma be his caregiver, or even just a beloved family friend. And the reason why people love this program is because it enhances privacy and allows people to feel autonomous and independent, having the right to choose their own caregivers. And in CDPAP, there's a wider scope of practice for the personal assistants, the caregivers, meaning that the caregivers are allowed to do things such as some skilled nursing tasks like medication administration, which is not allowed in traditional home care services. wound care, tracheotomy care, feeding tube care, ostomy care, and many others. In addition, the unique thing about CDPAP services is that that Medicaid grants a weekly bank of hours, meaning a little Johnny will get approved a certain amount of hours per week, and then little Johnny's family can decide how those hours are used week to week. So it could maybe just be 3 hours on Monday, no hours on Tuesday, 8 hours overnight on Wednesday, etc., as long as they don't go over 40 weekly hours. And this really enhances everyone's ability to kind of be their own boss of their home care services. And the last thing I'll just mention is the reason why people love this program really in the special needs community is the fact that little Johnny, once he's 21 years old, then his parents can get paid to be his caregivers, which they already are. So might as well get paid. And if you decide to consider joining community care, on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see the different benefits that community care provides the personal assistants, the caregivers, because what we do as the fiscal intermediary is process the payroll for the caregivers to make sure that they get paid timely and accurately every week. So I've done my competitive analysis, and there are a lot of home care agencies out there, but as of now, we are the only home care agency providing CDPAP services that offers a 401k, as well as health insurance, vacation pay, weekly pay, as well as our exclusive employee perks program, which allows people to receive discounts on things like motor vehicle purchases, groceries, electronics, movie tickets, childcare, etc. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see how you can get started. But I just encourage that if anyone has any questions, that you contact our team. Our contact information is at the bottom of your screen. It's that 888 number, or you could just simply email cdpap@communitycarehhs.com. And I did see a lot of familiar participants in today's little waiting room. So I'm very happy to see that there's a lot of families here that I've spoken to before. Good people know good people. And if even CDPAP's not right for you, please share this information with people that you think may benefit from CDPAP services. Regina and Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, Brian, what were you going to say?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So, okay. So this was a question for you, Megan. And are you still there, right? Okay, great. I have a 21-year-old that moved into a group home. Is CDPAP still available for me?
But Medicaid will only pay for the group home if it's funded through Medicaid. If it's an independent home that you've set up with a bunch of different families, that's different. But no, so Medicaid will only ever pay for the group home or home care services.
Okay, great. I don't think somebody asked a question, but I don't want to answer it. It's like asking if I know an individual. So I hope you don't mind, but I'm not going to answer that because I don't want to, if there's somebody, for privacy reasons, if I may. So Brian, I am going to go back to our, recently, okay. And so somebody's asking about CDPAP for a 15-year-old. So if I have a 15-year-old, will the 15-year-old be eligible for CDPAP?
Is because everyone is unique and different. Does your child have the need for physical assistance with their activities of daily living? And in order to receive home care services, you have to prove during a nursing assessment that comes from the state that individual needs at least 3 physical assistance with activities of daily living. So if you can prove that your child needs perhaps physical assistance with toileting, meal preparation, and light housekeeping, then she could be, or this child could be eligible. But it all depends on how you answer the nurse's questions during the nursing assessment. And community care, which is the agency that I work with, I should say, we actually, as a courtesy, help prepare families for those nursing assessments from the state. And that's a courtesy, it's free of charge.
Okay, and then somebody's asking about the CDPAP program used for high functioning adults diagnosed with high functioning autism. So again, it depends upon the needs of the individual. Correct?
Right. And so we actually have individuals who are considered to be high functioning, and they are able to direct their own care. Imagine that. And that's really the premise of this program. But if they're high functioning, they could still need assistance with activities of daily living, right? So maybe, just as an example, Regina, let's just say you needed home care services and you were able to independently shower and toilet yourself, but with grooming and meal preparation and escorting to medical appointments, you needed physical assistance. So, just as an example, you may think that someone is not eligible, but I always say contact our team. Let's walk you through the eligibility process to see if you are eligible. And even if you're only approved for a low amount of hours, say 10 hours a week, it's still better than having no extra hours a week of support. And it's a free program. It's through Medicaid.
Okay, great. So I'm going to figure out how to remove you as a co-host and get on to Brian's Social Security. Thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I would recommend that if you go there, Brian, it's a great organization in Smithtown and they do serve coffee.
I'm
Wow.
known as the CDPAP connoisseur as well as the coffee queen. So we serve lots of coffee to our guests.
So, okay. So Brian, take it away for Social Security. Can you see the screen, everyone, or no?
Not yet.
Okay, I will do that now. Okay, there we are.
Okay, if somebody was to contact Suffolk Independent Living Organization and they had generic questions about the review of their documentation to support the transmittal form with the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, that often can be provided with some minimal assistance, and it's no fee for that service. When we go to the review and development of documentation to support the application for supplemental security income, that becomes a little bit more labor intensive. And when I say labor intensive, we came up with a flat fee 10 years ago of $295. So for $295, I will then assist the families with the review of the development of their documentation that is often what has been developed by the school district. Maybe you make the recommendations to receive updated testing that may not reference the previous information that was embedded. And then also to assist families as we go through developing draft input for a functional report adult, which they'll probably receive as part of the process when they apply for supplemental security income, or the review of when they're coming to become a Social Security disability adult child. I also assist families with and becoming familiar with developing narratives in advance attached to a Social Security SSA 795 statement of claimant form. And the purpose of that is to be proactive. Have in your hand, before you make that initial phone call, the 1-800 number to schedule a telephone interview appointment date or an appointment at the local office with your son or daughter, but to have in advance your documentation, your updated full psychological over the age of 16, your adaptive scores that minimally support similar eligibility with OPWDD, to then have in your hand a functional report adult developed as a draft. So if you receive one from the Social Security Administration, which will have perhaps 2 or 3 week turnaround time with a barcode on the bottom, that you have yours prepared in advance to kind of relieve the stress. Also to then have narratives that were developed by mom and dad, grandparents, perhaps mom and dad's brothers and sister, or a friend of the family, or a sibling over the age of 18. And what you're really doing is you're painting the picture of the life of Tommy or Susie in their home from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, as related to the areas of socialization, personal hygiene, performing chores, concept of money, using the internet, all of those things that later on can be noted and recorded and perhaps used in a notice of unfavorable decision. The application for SSI is not something as simple as filling it out, signing a release. In that scenario, you really don't know then what is being forwarded in advance. You want to prepare your packet because to go to a hearing takes 2 years, and you're not something that's going to be fast-tracked. So that's why I encourage families to let's get everything in place first, and that's what I do. So we begin with the family. Often they'll be contacting Silo. I would then suggest that they scan no phone photo pictures, fax, or mail, or drop off the available documentation that they have. And then I'll respond back with suggested next steps in terms of how to proceed in developing and supportive information. So this is, and again, it's a flat fee, $295.
And if I could say $295 for lifelong receipt of Social Security income and its added benefits, which you'll get into, such as Social Security, disability, and or Medicare, and then the Medicaid that automatically comes with it. It's phenomenal. So it's well worth it. Thank you, Brian.
And I can say that the manner in which we put this together is the manner in which it has evolved, but hasn't changed. And this is my 44th year. And that is to let's get it done in advance. And if things need to be done, let's address it in advance. Because once a mistake is made in terms of what is submitted, it's so difficult to correct. Now, this is an application that I just use for training purposes, but what I encourage families is that if you complete the application incorrectly from the get-go, whether online or in a hard copy, that's difficult to correct. Schedule a telephone interview appointment so they will fill it out with you correctly, or an appointment at the local office with your son or daughter who just needs to be there to acknowledge that they are the applicant, giving you permission to assist them. And then you're just filling out the application. Also to note that when you're, say, at the initial appointment with your son or daughter, that person who's filling out the application may be making notations as to what their observations are of your son or daughter. And if those and that's not shared with you. But if those observations clearly, in their eyes, that's often a small percentage that may be approved with a letter within 7 to 10 days. Most often, after that telephone interview appointment or the in-person appointment, that person's going to receive a functional report adult to return, followed by later on going to see an IMA doctor. Over here in Suffolk County, it's most often over in Bohemia. And after seeing the IMA doctor, probably 98% are going to receive a letter of not eligible. Well, that's part of the process. Then you have to file the appeal. And if you file the appeal and all the documentation has been done correctly, then hopefully you'll have the benefit within 3 to 4 months. Or the scenario is you're going to a hearing, and that takes 2 years. And this is a functional report, adults. So I have the families draft input and kind of just walk them through as to what they're looking for. And also to understand that a functional report adult is often not completed by the individual with an intellectual developmental disability. It's completed by the person who's on the last page, completed by, and it's usually the parent or the guardian who often will later on become the representative payee. And it can only be one representative payee. And we talk about that. And there's also a functional report adult third party. There's actually a third one. So if somebody's receiving Social Security disability under the age of 18 and there's a review, they could receive 3 different functional reports. And the parent will say, do I have to fill out all 3? Yes, you do, because they could be coming from different locations. And you want to make sure that they're all consistent with each other. So have the patience, because once you submit something, it's like painting the room in your house. It's not how quickly you paint it, it's the final product. So that's something that I review with the families, and making sure mom and dad are on the same page and understanding this is a statement of claimant form. So if they develop a draft narrative, later on it will be the name of their son or daughter, the son or daughter's social security number, name of the person making the statement would be mom, dad, grandma, neighbor, relationship. And then it would write here, see attached narrative from Mrs. Smith dated March 31st, 2023. Because if they get separated in the copy machine later on, that's how they can match them together. And then on the reverse page, fill out the contact information. But it's really nice because you're becoming proactive to convey to somebody in Baltimore, Endicott, New York, Kentucky, paint the picture of the life of your son or daughter from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed. Not something that's written as an assessment. Well, he'll never begin and she can never. No. Here's the observations of what I see. Here are the observations as to how my son or daughter respond as related to their autism, their cerebral palsy. What are those behaviors? What are those, everything that everyone would see if we're all in the same room? And I also provide to the families, this is just a sample notice of unfavorable decision. And there's many, many pages, but it's interesting for the parent to see how then it can be interpreted by Social Security. So when you say sometimes, well, the word sometimes can be omitted and say Mrs. Smith conveys, Tommy can. So you got to look at it as your son or daughter's application. Take mom and dad out of the picture. They just moved out. They went down to Boca Raton. Now, can your son or daughter do that with nobody home alone? That's how I view it when I communicate to the families. Because once we get down that slippery slope, can do with assistance, well, there's all natural supports in an employment setting. And on the last page of a notice of unfavorable decision, they highlight all of those different employment openings throughout the country that your son or daughter may be able to perform. You know, if it was done, and even then you say, well, is it a done deal? Is this for life? No, time goes by. You can restart the application process all over again. And that's what's important.
So, Brian, somebody chimed in and they have a Social Security call next week. And the child is going to start Access VR soon for work training that they heard through their high school that their son graduated from. So during that phone call, I don't know what was submitted and so on. So do you have any good pointers for, because she's going to be humming on the phone.
Well, and what I'm assuming, the assumption is that it's a telephone interview appointment to complete the application. And the application does not include that type of information to be asked at that time. But I would encourage the family to reach out and let's shoot me an email. That's the best way to communicate. And I'll review your current documentation and respond back with suggestions. So during the initial appointment, say it was in person, that individual is really just there to validate, that's Tommy, this is Susie, here's their identification. They're done. Now it's mom and dad filling out the basic information. Where does he live? The bank statement. What's in the account? If you have over $2,000 at the time that the initial application is submitted, that stops the application process. So there's those other pieces there. So it's really generic information for the application, but you want it filled out correctly. Or I had one last week with she put her son on the phone, and I'm like, mistake number one, because that person may not have the capacity to answer the questions correctly. So that's where your son or daughter is giving you permission to represent them, to speak on their behalf. And I think that's where they're going for it. But from that point forward, yes, you would want to make sure that you have your documentation. It's not uncommon if the boy or girl goes to the Social Security or conveys, the parents say, well, my daughter's going to say she's going to be a teacher. She's going to be a nurse. He's going to be an airplane pilot. We all have our dreams and aspirations. We all go through schools and they put it through the work interest inventories, the career zone, the job bank, going out in with the supports of a job coach. I understand that. Access VR, the applications used to be within 2 years prior to the student's anticipated date of graduation. Now the work readiness programs are going down as early as age 14 with school districts. So you're right. Capturing that information or from the employment training program through OPWDD, the ETP program. All of those pieces we need to dialogue. We should dialogue in advance. I hope I answered the question.
So this was the appeal process. So if you're doing an appeal, I would recommend that you don't do it alone.
But there is a time frame that when
Yes.
you receive the notice that after seeing the IMA doctor, you want to file the appeal with a quick turnaround time. And if there's any additional documentation that you have, you can always continue to submit additional documentation moving forward. Great point. But that's normal. Well, parents stop that. Well, let's pick it up and let's continue. We're not getting younger. Lodging agreement, generally speaking, the initial benefit will be about $500 and change when approved, and it gets deposited into the joint account. The representative payee will then remove that, put it into a separate account, spend it, put it into an ABLE account. Regina will talk about that. Then it's important that they submit a lodging agreement to the Social Security Administration. And a lodging agreement is only a financial arrangement. And we usually, I should suggest, $450. So if the parent was to fill one out today, it would be $450. And then on line 11, it would be May 1st, provided it is notarized in April. You don't need it as part of the application process, but you definitely want to submit it after the initial benefit is approved, deposited, and withdrawn, because then they'll bring them up to the maximum benefit, which now is about $900 and change. Federal, and with the New York State contribution, comes close to $1,000 a month. And I recently spoke to somebody, and they've been receiving SSI for almost 20 years. Never submitted one. Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Retro? The answer is no. And that's a lodging agreement. And the Social Security Red Book. Excellent, excellent book. Regina and I have distributed thousands throughout our training career here. Now it is available online. Doesn't matter if it's outdated, up to date. The information is all there, accurate. And it gives a nice overview of what's the difference between SSI under the age of 18, SSI over the age of 18, Social Security disability under the age of 18, Social Security disability over the age of 18. Often then I get questions about the Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities. I had 2 this week, and that's where you can earn up to over $70,000 and maintain your Medicaid-funded support services. And for that gentleman who I was in contact with, he's receiving OPWDD services and CDPAP. So it's just, yay, it was a great conversation.
Yes. So somebody chimed in that they're applying for their son diagnosed with autism. And I think what they're saying is that you're totally right. Social Security needs testing, wants to know about bank account information. If you're in the middle of the process, I would recommend to reach out to Brian and his email. I did type it up a few times in an answer, but his email is bmcilvain@siloinc.org. And I think he prefers email. Sometimes the phone calls, messages, get, waylaid. So these are the links.
Yes, best by email. I alternate days between working remotely and working in the office. Some things I do better here, and other days I do better at home where it's quiet. So the email is best. And if you don't hear a response back from me within a day or two, send me another one. Just sometimes I get one below after another. A lot of people are in crisis, and you get on the phone with an hour and a half. You want to diffuse the crisis as best as possible and put the clear steps moving forward. And it's then, putting those clear steps is one thing. When mom and dad are in sync and ready to move forward, that's an important component. And I'll always support their decisions, however they proceed.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I'm going to lead from Social Security income. We're going to talk a little bit about Supplemental Needs Trust. Now, before I get into the weeds about that, Social Security income again, I'm just reiterating, your child should have less than $2,000 when you're applying for Social Security income. I want you to canvass all of your child's resources before you start that application process. Do not forget about the 529 accounts. Do not forget about the savings bonds. And if you have well-meaning grandparents or aunts or uncles, please make sure that they don't have a secret UGMA account for your son or daughter. I have been on, I've had those crisis phone calls where the grandparents had an account set up for the adult child and did not inform the parents. And the parents applied for SSI. They filled out the application. They received SSI. And after a year and a half, SSI came back and said, whoa, what is this $10,000 account that's in your child's name? And you owe us money back. So it's very important for you to do that, do your due diligence. I will tell you, as a parent, you're always constantly advocating for your child. You advocate during the school process and so on, and then you continue with these benefits, and you're going to make sure that your child has access to all the benefits. As Brian said, those individuals that are working people with disability or on SSI, we want to make sure they receive SNAP benefits. Those are food stamps. Silo has some great individuals, professionals there that could assist you in making sure that you can access those benefits. So once your child or loved one has those benefits, what are you going to do? How are you going to make sure, if you are so restricted, especially if you have SSI, less than $2,000? If something happens to you, you could end up leaving your child a chunk of money. And that will impact all this effort that you have strived for in obtaining these benefits, so your child can get out in the community, access to socialization, employment, and so on. So I have this presentation here, and it's talking about special needs planning. And what is special needs planning? It's an art form, and the art form it's a legal art form, and it's obviously a trust that is available for the beneficiary that is on governmental benefits. And the trustee is the person that's going to be in charge of the funds that are in that trust. That trustee is going to make sure they're not going to hand money to the person that's on governmental benefits, but they're going to pay for things that is over and above what Social Security income is providing and or Medicaid is providing. So let's just say your child's under the CDPAP program, and you want to pay a ComHab worker out of the trust. No, that's what the CDPAP program is all about. And I will tell you, it sounds kind of incredulous, but so Medicaid does not like it if a trustee is paying for things that the benefits should be paying. It's a very strict, these are the boundaries. Supplemental Needs Trust pays for things that the benefits do not, and Medicaid will pay for those benefits. Sometimes Medicaid is a shortfall, and that's when the Supplemental Needs Trust or the Special Needs Trust, interchangeable, you can use, is available for the individual. So why do you plan? You want to preserve those assets. You want to allow for private funding in case, the public funding gets, shrinks. And you want to provide a financial support. Right now, as parents, you are the trustees. You are the Social Security program. You provide so much for your loved one, but you have to plan that you need to put a framework in place, or some sort of foundation, so your child will have those benefits and access all those added benefits so that when you're no longer there, they can continue living in a full life with a certain quality of life that you've worked so hard for. So these are some people have these idea of inheritance. The most famous one is usually, I'm going to leave everything to the sister and she's going to take care of her brother or sister. Well, the problem is you're leaving everything to an individual, a human being, and that human being is subject to divorce, bankruptcy, mental illness, death, and so on. So you really do want to establish a plan that you can that can continue on so long as your child is alive. It's so important. And when we sit down with families and or loved ones and we're doing some planning, we talk about various options besides the Social Security income and Medicaid. And I always tell people, apply for that first. When you're, if you want, come back after that and we'll do some estate planning, because I really want people to avail themselves to the benefits. We also talk about ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts are a specialized account where it could be useful for the individual if they have too much money in their name and they're applying for SSI if they're an adult and they had $10,000 in their name and they don't know what to do with it and they want to shelter it, they could put it into an ABLE account. I love ABLE accounts and they have a useful purpose for it. But I always tell people it's not a good estate planning tool. An ABLE account is a specialized account available for the beneficiary where it limits them to contributions of $17,000 a year. The maximum before Social Security benefits are impacted is $100,000. And guess what? If the beneficiary passes away, it is a payback to the Department of Social Services. So this is why you really want to plan ahead. You don't want to leave monies to your child directly. And I will, if you see at the bottom of the page, third-party supplemental needs trust. That is what the ideal standard is, because if you leave monies to your loved one who's on benefits, the problem is they might have to do a trust, but guess what? It might be a first-party supplemental needs trust. And like the ABLE account, it is a payback to the Department of Social Services. It requires annual accounting. Oy vey, you already do enough with accountings and so on with the benefits. So it is important for you to spend that time and do the special needs planning. So this is just an overview of the different trusts. Like I mentioned, the first party, the third party. I don't know if anyone is familiar with pool trusts. So sometimes somebody will have a Social Security disability income overage. And they wanted to keep Medicaid. If your child started with Social Security disability and they started out, receiving payments of a certain amount, and then when they become a disabled adult child and they want to receive Medicaid, you might have to shelter that monthly income. Now, I will tell you, for those that don't know, the monthly income threshold for Medicaid is wonderful this year. It really came up. New York increased its levels to $1,563. The federal government increased its levels to $1,677. So that's a big jump in income, because last year, what was it, $884. So a lot of people that were had Social Security disability payments of $1,200 used to have to do a pooled trust. Now the need for that overage is no longer. So be mindful, keep an eye out. If you have a pooled trust, I suggest you look at your monthly benefits, look at the current thresholds, and you might make sure that adjustment. I just had someone the other day, she was still contributing a lot of money because it was still under last year's benefits. It's now, middle of April. Those benefits should have been decreased, the monthly contributions, or if anything, may have been eliminated altogether. So I won't get into the weeds about it, but I just want you to realize that, these are some information about, the first party trust and, the details of when you have to do a first party trust. That's when you're not doing any planning, or if your child receives an award under a personal injury suit. Your children could be injured. And if you have to go through a personal injury suit and monies come to your child and they're on Medicaid and Social Security income, that's when a first party special needs trust will have to be established. Of course, if the amount is less than $17,000, I always recommend a portion to be spent down and or a contribution made to the ABLE account. So a third party, it's money from others. When I mention that you continue to advocate for your child or a loved one, it is so true. Even after you establish this third party trust, our office always prepares a sample friends and family letter. We, essentially says, I don't know if you're thinking of leaving anything to Johnny, but we want you to know that we've established a third party supplemental needs trust. If you are thinking of leaving a bequest to him, please leave it too. And then we put the title of the third party supplemental needs trust and the details. So you can share that with some, loving relatives that want to make a contribution to your child. So I'm just going to take the time out and just look at this. The questions. My son is 19 and I'm his payee representative. Does that 2000? No. As a payee representative, it doesn't apply to you. It's actually your son's resources. So it's only to that. And I do suggest this as a Social Security account. I would separate that payee rep account from my own checking account. I've seen people say, oh, I just want to manage one checking account. What you have to realize is Social Security is auditing those accounts. So you really, for privacy reasons, I would recommend that you keep your child's payee representative account separate. And the payee representative account is never, any contributions go from that to a third party trust. Why? Because it has to come from a third party, not your son, not your daughter. Sure. I mean, anyone could open up an ABLE account. I will just tell you, if you look under My New York ABLE, they do, I think I don't know if it's happened yet, but My New York ABLE is supposed to be a little bit more friendlier with some of these accounts. For if somebody needs a guardianship, they used to say, go back to get a court order. Oy vey, to go back to get a court order, and it's usually for a de minimis amount. It's really very time consuming and costly. besides My New York Able, there is a stable out of Pennsylvania that they just say, oh, your child has an overage or money's in their name that you need to shelter. You could put it in, and they don't ask about a guardianship, because some people don't have the requisite capacity to make financial decisions and they have an existing guardianship. So just for something to be wary of. I do believe that it's supposed to change in New York, but I don't know the exact date. I do recall that it was sometime in April. Okay, the individual is not utilizing her monthly Social Security. Whoa. Social Security thinks you're saving money. They're going to say, we're paying you too much. So what did Brian talk about in the first part? He talked about a room and board agreement. So if the individual is receiving monies each month, and there should be contributions made for the room and board, and or if monies are, I do know sometimes in the personal needs account, if they're in a group home, it does kind of grow a little bit. You could start a payment plan, and this sounds awful, but you could start a payment plan where you're prepaying for your child's pre-need funeral arrangement. It sounds, harsh for you to even think about it, but it's such a comfort because you've established it, and the people that are left behind don't have to worry about what to do for your child. So the child that is not spending the Social Security lives in an RTC. I would talk to the social worker in that facility to make sure that things are being done properly. And if you want some ideas, you can always call Silo, speak to a benefits counselor. We also do offer, a courtesy consult and so on about the particulars. Okay. Sorry. And then this slide is the differences between the first party and the third party. Obviously, the critical issue is money that is in that person's name with the disability, and the third party is money from others. And irrespective, no one gives money to the beneficiary. If I was a trustee and the beneficiary wanted to purchase a computer or the like, I would not be handing out money directly to the beneficiary, because I'm making the entire trust available as a resource. I would always be paying for the computer. I would be reimbursing a credit card or paying Best Buy directly. And then the pool trust, one thing about the pool trust, I always tell people, this is not an account for you to save money in. I want you to spend it. Money goes in, money goes out. It does go back upon the person's passing. It does go back to the pool trust company, which is a not-for-profit company, which is nice. But again, you don't want to leave monies on the table. Funding a trust. How can you fund a trust? There's various ways that you can fund a trust. Now, I'm not a big fan of real estate being held in the Supplemental Needs Trust, because how the budget works with the OPWDD program, it impacts their budget, and you can probably do better with other type of trusts, like a revocable trust for your real estate if you want, and with a life estate for your beneficiary. And then the Supplemental Needs Trust could pay for the carrying cost. And of course, cash is always king. Funding the trust or anything of the like, investments, retirement benefits, that's really important. We have a specific type of trust for those type of retirement benefits. I don't know if any of you are aware, under the Secure Act that came about in 2020, there is, if I leave an IRA to my spouse, it's wonderful. My spouse could, it grows and it's adjusted to their life expectancy. So if they're 40 and their life expectancy is 54 years, let's just say, obviously the money's going to grow during that time of 54 years. What happens is if I leave it to a child without a disability, it's going to pay out in 10 years. And that is paid out under the child's income bracket. So that could be a lot of money if your child is earning some money, and is in a 30% income bracket, and they're getting, a good amount each year. 30% is going to the government. What's nice under the Secure Act for people with disabilities, it does go on their life expectancy. So that same growth. So if you left it to your child who's 24 at the time, their life expectancy is, let's just say, 78 years. It would grow and grow, and the income, the RMDs, required minimum distributions that are coming out of that, will be paying and supporting, it will go into the Supplemental Needs Trust. So it's really nice. And then, of course, life insurance. And then these are permissible distributions and costly mistakes. So I'm going to jump in real quick to, sorry, I just have to somehow get to my next presentation, but I'm going to CDs. Yes, a CD can fund a supplemental needs trust. What I typically recommend is that I'm a big proponent of the airplane theory. So if a parent is establishing a third-party supplemental needs trust, I will tell them to establish a nominal bank account, and let's make all your assets be directed to it upon your passing. So it's not really funded until both either you just pass away, or if there's a spouse, both you and the spouse pass away, that's when the S&T is funded. Why tie up money? Because you may need it for yourself. And the airplane theory is always put the oxygen mask on first, so you could help your child. So if you put the CD in the trust, that could impact, if you needed money for a furnace, obviously, that will be a problem. So let me just end that and get out of that. And that was Brian's. And here is the other one. Okay. So we're talking about people with disabilities, and people with disabilities like you and I have the ability to make decisions for themselves or not. So I will just mention that a person with a disability or any individual turning age 18 should have advance directives in place for themselves. Tonight I could, drive home. Yeah, even though I am home right now, sorry. But Brian, I'm sorry, could drive home and he could, suffer, an accident and have a traumatic brain injury. He needs to have those advance directives in place for himself, so his loved ones don't have to establish a guardianship. And it's very important. I just talked to an individual today mom is diagnosed with the same type of dementia that Bruce Willis has, and we're just crossing our fingers for a lucid moment that perhaps the person can sign a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy, so they could start doing some planning for mom and or dad, and likewise for the individual with a disability that is on governmental benefits. A lot of times I will meet somebody that when they're 18 or 19, they understand risks and benefits, and they are very cooperative. Of course, I trust mom and dad. They would safeguard my monies. I've had individuals say, oh, no, I trust mom, but not dad. Dad's not good with money. So they have an understanding, and they are very observant because they have been living with you. And they have the ability to sign these documents. Unfortunately, there are some individuals that don't have the requisite capacity. And if they have a developmental disability or a significant cognitive impairment, there is a 17A guardianship. What you should be thinking about, and I want you to differentiate between your child at age 18 may have poor judgment, but they may have the ability to understand risks and benefits. At age 18, I wouldn't want to think about what my judgment was compared to, at 28. So I want you to differentiate that. And sometimes kids just don't have any experience with check writing and so on. Some of the schools when I was growing up, they really did have those hands-on, typing classes and other classes that really helped you through your activities of daily living when you become an adult. I've met people that came into my office, started working, and they didn't know how to fill out an envelope, and they're not, they're a non-disabled individual. So I just want you to understand that. Okay, so the slides are available for under the S&T. The slides are available on my website, so you could just go there and download it. And you said you wanted a list of all the things that an S&T can pay for. It is available for you. So can I put my son on any form of life insurance while receiving SSI? Well, life insurance is a resource, especially whole life insurance. So if it's in your son's name, your son that could be considered a resource. So what I recommend for your life insurance policy is you could name your son's Supplemental Needs Trust as the beneficiary. So if something happens to you, funds are available for your son when you're not there. Okay, so I kind of reviewed about the advanced directives. I will just mention the next couple of slides is talking about the 17A process. There is a judge, and just like Social Security and OPWDD, there are evaluations used and doctors' affirmations that are supplied and or psychological affidavits supplied to the court to establish that this person doesn't have the requisite ability to make those decisions for themselves. And I will tell you that the 17A is under, scrutiny, and it should be, because you are, essentially saying this person can't make decisions and they don't have the ability to do so. So I'm going to make all decisions for them. And that includes all medical and dental decisions and so on. So Sometimes the court will appoint a guardian ad litem to review the evaluations, to meet your child, to meet you. What they want to know is if the child needs the guardianship, that the proposed guardians would consider the best interests of their child. And, you know, they also look into the background of the individual. So sometimes people have, you know, between the age of, 18 and 25, they may have some run-ins with the law and so on. And the court they always do a background check on individuals, every adult that's living in the household and so on. They want to make sure that person is safe and the guardian will maintain their safety. Again, keeping their best interests. You know why? Because once you're the guardian, there's no annual reporting. There's no check-in unless someone knocks on the door to the surrogate court. Your son or daughter could be living like Harry Potter under the stairs with you, and they don't know because there's no annual check-in, any court oversight. So that's why they do that process in the beginning. They really want to make sure before they grant that guardianship. So yes, so if you have advance directives for your child, meaning a power of attorney, if you have a guardianship for your child, you do not need advance directives. That person has already been deemed by the state unable to sign those directives. So it's not an uncommon question. I do have parents asking, I need a healthcare proxy. You already have it. It's the guardianship. So I do tell parents when they're granted a guardianship, you get these letters, and I would put them on my phone. I would download it on my phone, because when you're going to the hospital, you're going to the doctor's office, you don't have that piece of paper, but you do have your phone. So that would be an important aspect. And other points I want to talk about before I forget. With the guardianship, you can consider standby guardians. If something happens to you, who should be following you? Sometimes we recommend to people that you could appoint your adult sibling, the person with the disability, adult sibling, as a co-guardian, so you can get longevity out of the guardianship. That all the 2 guardians or 3 guardians don't have to all be there at the doctor's office. So you can make decisions individually. So going back to Brian's, before I forget, SSI about the 2000, we didn't talk about work. So we do want your children to work. We do want them to start paying into FICA. And after a while, after 40 quarters, what happens, Brian, when I pay into FICA and I'm on SSI?
Now you're eligible for Social Security Disability.
Yes. So, and what will happen if I get Social Security Disability?
Along comes Medicare.
Yes. 2 years after that. I love it when I'm sitting across from a family. They have SSI for their child. They have OPWDD, SSI. Their child is working, and they've been working at a job and so long that they have Social Security Disability and Medicare along with Medicaid. That is a wonderful scenario for your child. The circle of Medicaid doctors are like this. The circle of Medicare doctors is, tremendous. And I do recommend that don't Your private insurance, again, your private insurance, you can keep your child on your private insurance. They do allow that post 26, provided you provide them with some documentation is that they have a developmental disability. And again, it is all about the documentation. You have to, and keep a record of it, because the documentation is, generally the same type of questions everybody's asking. So somebody is asking about what's the difference between a power of attorney and an advance directives. Again, the power of attorney is I have the requisite ability to appoint somebody. I can appoint Brian as my agent. I want him to pay my bills. I want him to take care of whatever necessities, even, apply for benefits, establish trusts on my behalf in case I lose capacity. The guardianship is saying I cannot sign that power of attorney because I don't have the requisite capacity. I don't know if anyone has any other questions, but if you look through our slides in detail, they do give some informative information. Brian's information for Silo is, go ahead, Brian.
Well, my information is, as Regina said before, McIlvain at siloinc.org. But a few points that I wrote down while Regina was conveying some topics is, one, when you have a joint account and life is good and your money goes in and you take it out and you're maintaining it under the $2,000 threshold, all is good, because if it goes over the $2,000 threshold combined, then you're ineligible for the benefit the following month. And Social Security will catch up probably within the next year when they do an annual review. But occasionally I'll also then have a parent say, well, you know what? Mom's overseeing the SSI going in. She's withdrawing and she's the rep payee. Dad says, hey, listen, Tommy, now that you're working, how about you start saving for a car? Let's put that in a separate account. Or something of a similar pattern like that. The two accounts then that are associated with the son or daughter, now the combined resources go in excess of $2,000. You owe the money back. That has been previously given to you each benefit of the month. So it's important then also the representative payee is responsible to inform Social Security with the change in earnings. So when Tommy or Susie go to work, the representative payee is responsible to inform Social Security of the change in earnings. And I have a nice draft of template that I provide to the families. They can fill it out on a quarterly basis and consolidates the information to provide to the Social Security Administration. Basically, with SSI, you take the gross for the month, you minus 85, you divide by 2. That's pretty accurate as to the amount that the SSI check should be reduced. And that's how it will continue. Now, if you're paid weekly, it's actually you take the gross and you multiply it by 4.3, and that gives you more of an indicator as to what are the gross earnings for the month. And that's also covered in the Social Security Red Book, but it gets a little bit more detailed, and I try to keep it simple in that approach. The other piece then is a review. Within the past couple of months, I'm getting parents who are receiving a review, and they're like, Brian, my son or daughter has had autism at 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Why are they asking for a review? And it is a medical review of what they're looking at is not that your son or daughter doesn't continue to have autism, PDD, NOS, Asperger's, cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, intellectual disability, Tourette's. No, they're looking at thinking about functional performance as it relates to work. What activities are they now demonstrating that may show that there's been a change, an improvement, quote unquote, going to college, going to work. So that's why I kind of put the mindset into the parents as to how to approach it when providing input. True, they are working, but then what are the supports that are being provided to Tommy or Susie? That's important to convey in the review that you're completing and returning back to the Social Security Administration. Just wanted to put that out there because this past couple of weeks, I'm like getting 2 or 3 a week and everybody's like, what's going on? Why is it my son? Why is it my daughter? Well, no, it's just like the wave coming in. Here we go. No rhyme or reason.
Okay, and then I do want to mention Social Security disability. another way to get Social Security disability is if the person that's on SSI, if their parent retires or goes on disability or passes away, that disabled adult child could get Medicare. And again, it has to be 2 years after receiving Social Security disability. It doesn't coincide automatically with Social Security disability.
Correct. If the SSD amount is greater than the SSI, then that kind of wipes out the SSI check. But if the SSD amount is less than the SSI, then you'll get a blend of both.
Right. So, okay. And I'm just checking to see if there's any other comments and so on. Not that I see. And I hope everyone, I hope it was informative. And if you missed something, this one will be recorded. The February one, and I'm sorry, Brian, we essentially say the same thing over and over again, maybe a different beat, but we do say it. And we try to be informative about OPWDD and SSI and their and special needs trusts and guardianships and the like. So if you wanted to go up on the Brandow Law website, there are pre-recorded videos up there for you. And I do have a video workshop on guardianship. So if you wanted to attempt it yourself, you could do that. So, all right, Brian. Well, thank you everyone for the courtesy of listening to us. And Megan, thank you so much for giving us that lovely bit on CDPAP program and the support that you provide to families.
It's my pleasure. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Wait. Oh, somebody's saying thank you. So
thank
good.
you.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.